Hello, welcome once again to Off the Shelf Books on Tour. My guest today is Dorothy Stephens, who has come with her, I would say, delightful book. Do I say that too often? Please pronounce the name so I don't mess it up.
Heri?
Heri, which means goodbye.
Correct.
In what language?
Swahili.
Swahili. And it's an adventure that you took rather unexpectedly to Kenya and Tanzania.
Tanzania was 10 years later.
Okay. To say you traveled extensively is putting it minimally.
Yes.
And it's not a memoir. It's a lot of memories put together, and you dedicate it to your daughter, Kelly.
Yes.
Who apparently went to BU, and the proceeds from the book go to an educational scholarship?
Yes, she actually did not go to BU. She went to Tufts.
Okay.
But when my husband and I established a scholarship in her memory, we found them more receptive at BU to doing this. And so that's why it was at BU. They also have an excellent school of education, and this scholarship is for teachers. So that was one of the reasons for choosing
So
BU.
in her adult life, she went on to be a teacher?
She was a teacher. She spent 9 years in Indonesia teaching English and training English teachers. And the scholarship is for Indonesian educators to get their master's degrees at BU.
So, well, that's a wonderful beginning and end. Now tell us the story, and I'm just going to sit here and say nothing. I love that you did the everyday things rather than just skimming over the top and all the politicians and high mucky mucks that you met. And you were right on the cusp of British colonialism being challenged.
We were.
And you must have been scared right out of your wits.
Well, when my husband first told me that we were being posted to Nairobi, he was in the State Department Foreign Service, and he was posted as Cultural Affairs Officer to Nairobi. And when he first told me about our posting, I had just read Something of Value by Robert Ruark, which was the story about the Mau Mau Revolution in Kenya, which was a very, very bloody fight for independence on both sides, lots of atrocities. So that's what the mental image I had of Kenya. And I was taking 3 fairly young children there. So yeah, I was very apprehensive.
And I love the bit about the washing machine, when the washing machine arrived, but I'm jumping ahead of myself. You found the class system very thick.
Yes.
And it wasn't the way you chose to live, so you often got put down for your desire not to have house staff.
Yes.
But when you realized if they didn't work for you, they went back to their villages and didn't provide for their families.
Right, and I also discovered that with this demands, social demands on me and my husband, I couldn't do it all, that I really did need those servants because we didn't have any of those modern conveniences until we got that washing machine you mentioned.
And they were almost afraid of your kindness and your comprehension and your understanding, but they caught on real quick.
The Africans? Oh yeah, the Africans loved us Americans. They weren't very fond of the British, their colonial masters.
You were too fond of some of them themselves.
Some of them. I learned later, when we went back 10 years later to Tanzania, and we visited Kenya several times, and I met some of the early white settlers who had stayed on after independence, and they were a totally different breed. So I kind of had to revise my opinion of some of the British colonialists. There were some good ones too.
They usually are, but unfortunately the negatives are the loudest.
Yes.
And the most pompous.
Right. Right.
So I'm glad you got to balance it out. But I'm sure that the Africans themselves, your workers and your helpers in the house, thought that you were a gift from the gods.
They really appreciated being treated like people.
Yeah.
Instead of like servants.
But it's almost like having a wonderful teacher for your kids, as wonderful as it is the next year they might have less than, and that's a hard fall.
Yeah, that's true.
And I love that when they hurt themselves, the women planting your garden, and you medicated one of them and you washed their wound, that nobody had ever done that for them.
Probably no white person.
And it came, you almost had a Red Cross flag on the house because everybody...
I know, then I was famous for Band-Aids and aspirin.
And you and the children got very close to, I say nursemaid, but what did you call her?
She's called an Aya in Swahili, And yes, she was wonderful. We kept in touch with her for many, many years. And I'm still in touch with some of her grandchildren.
Good enough, and I'm sure that was as important to her.
I think so.
In her culture.
Her daughter-in-law told me once that Rachel was the name of our ayah. Rachel said, never forget the Stephens family. And so that's the way she felt about us.
Oh, I'm sure.
Same way we felt about her.
I'm sure. And then that was 2 years. Oh, tell about the ants. The animals that you envisioned as you were flying in, they came to visit,
yes,
didn't
they were a reality, all right. Well, we had been hearing, all kinds of animal noises from the forest around our house during the night. And we had bats flying up and down the stairwell, and we had geckos living on the ceilings. But the worst thing that happened was the safari ants. Just shortly after we moved in, my husband opened the door to go out to a meeting, and he slammed the door and yelled, "Safari ants!" And I ran over and looked over his shoulder, and there was this swarming river of reddish-brown ants coming up the driveway and up over the front stoop and toward the front door. And so he said, "Call Ollie," who was our houseman. And Ollie came and went and got hot ashes out of the fireplace, opened the door, sprinkled the ashes, and the ants turned around and went away again. But they were really vicious-looking animals, and they can devour a small animal or even a human.
Now, were they the size of our ants or more like a
no,
bumblebee?
they were almost an inch long.
Wow.
Huge, with big feelers and, nasty-looking things. And then a few nights later, it was Christmas Eve, and I went in to take a bath, and someone had left the bathroom door window open. And here's this stream of ants coming over the windowsill and down the wall and into the bathtub. And I didn't have time to call Ollie or go look for hot ashes, so I just turned the hot water faucet on hard. And when they felt that boiling water, they turned around and back up the wall and out the window again. So that was my last contact with safari ants.
It had probably been the last time I took a bath.
Well, I got rid of the few that were in the tub and took my bath.
Good for you. But you learned from watching him, so I imagine you had to step back and learn the food. In place of Coca-Cola, your children had an orange drink.
Squash, orange squash. Really not very tasty stuff.
But when they get back to the States, they missed it.
Yeah, it's amazing how they adapt. When we first got to Nairobi, all they wanted to do was go out and find American hamburgers and American cartoons, and there weren't any. But they learned to love it. They loved seeing the animals and monkeys.
Your son wanted a monkey?
Yeah, my son wanted a monkey.
And that didn't go well?
Unfortunately, that didn't go well. He came in one day and said there was a monkey in the neighbor's tree, and he wanted some bread or something to entice it down so he could catch it. So he said, "All right, if you can catch it, you can keep it, stupid." And so he tried to catch it, and he came back with a really bad bite on his arm. The monkey had come down and bitten him and taken off. And he had to have rabies tests. And
did he have to have this series of shots?
No. We took the animal was shot by a neighbor, and we took it to a lab, and it was tested. It did not have rabies.
Oh, thank you, God.
Yeah. But it was a nasty wound. It took weeks to heal.
And he stood clear of monkeys from there on out?
He was not too interested in having one after that.
And that's usually when the monkeys know that and come to him before they approach anybody else in the family?
I don't know about that, but he was finished with monkeys, thank you.
Did the other children take on the wanderlust? Did they go back? Did they travel and live internationally?
All 4 of our children have been back to Kenya. Our daughter, Kelly, was the one who lived in Indonesia. But yes, my other 3 children have all traveled to Kenya and elsewhere. Indonesia, we've all been to Indonesia. I just came back from a trip to Indonesia in May.
Good for you.
Yeah.
When you were a little girl and you were deciding what you wanted to be, when you grew up, did you want to be a world traveler and a published author?
Not really. I think all I wanted to do was, like so many teenagers, wanted to escape from my little hometown and go somewhere more exciting. But I think the farthest I thought was probably New York. I lived in New Jersey, so my sights were set fairly close to home.
But you certainly made up for it.
Yes, well, thanks to my husband. I mean, his work took us to some of these places. And I probably never would have gone if that hadn't happened.
In the adventure of writing, what made you want to put it down into a book?
Well, I didn't keep a journal while we were in Kenya.
Really?
Shame
It's
on me.
so explicit.
Yeah,
I'm
well, but I
surprised.
wrote weekly letters home to my parents and my husband's parents, and our mother saved the letters and gave them back to me.
Wow.
And I just put them in a suitcase and stuck it up in the attic for years. And then I think it was sometime in the 1980s, I was looking for something up in the attic, and I stumbled across this suitcase, and I started reading the letters, and the memories just came pouring out. So I started writing them down, but not with the idea of writing a book. I was just writing down stories as I thought of them and sticking them in a folder on the closet shelf. And eventually I realized I probably had enough for a book. So that's when I started trying to shape it into some sort of a narrative.
And how did you pick your publisher, and diving into the publishing world's a little different than writing?
It was a learning experience for me because I had never published anything before. I did lots of queries to many, many publishers and university presses, and I got some very nice rejections, but no takers. So I eventually went with iUniverse and self-published the book. And that was a good experience. They were very helpful because I knew nothing about the publishing process at the time. And so they walked me through it, and it worked out very well.
And it has been well received?
I think so, yeah. I mean, it's not a blockbuster, but
55 Shades of Grey, no.
yeah, no.
Do you get any feedback from readers? Do you have people, do you speak at libraries and stuff?
I
and get
do.
questions?
I'm working more on my second book now, but in marketing. But I did a number of appearances with Query in schools, libraries, book clubs, senior centers, all kinds of places all over the Boston area, southern Maine and New Hampshire, and got lots of good feedback. Sometimes I'd get letters or emails from total strangers who said they had read the book and how much they enjoyed it.
What was the most predominant question? What are they most interested in, if there was one?
What was the most predominant question? I don't know. I guess people were most interested in the fact that I took these 3 young children there.
And brought them back.
And brought them back.
That's it.
Very important, yeah.
And you weren't even allowed to sit together on the plane.
Well, they didn't have seats together, you're right.
That for a kid, I mean, that's, let alone you with the baby on your lap and your oldest one down behind you.
Right, right. Several rows away, yeah.
And how long was the trip? 8 or 10 hours?
It was, we flew from New York to Rome, and then the next day we flew from Rome to Nairobi, 14 hours in an old prop plane, noisy and bouncing around in the sky, and didn't see a light. For 14 hours, we didn't see a light. It was so
no television,
dark.
No iPad, no tablet.
Nothing like that.
Just
no.
keeping your mind occupied. You should have written the book then.
Well, good idea.
You're braver than I am.
Well, I don't know about that. I learned a few things about bravery over there, but
I would imagine, yeah, some of the encounters that you.
I think I developed a lot more self-confidence through some of those experiences.
And you worked with the Girl Guides?
I did.
In the YWCA?
I did.
So you left a lot of you in the young women that were coming up there.
I hope so.
Do you ever hear from any of them?
No, I don't. Not anymore.
Well,
I did for a while, but
good, and they were flourishing. A lot of times I'll work on something, and then when I walk away, if it falls on its face and nobody follows through, it's a heartbreak.
Yeah, no, it was very successful. I was teaching cooking, believe it or not, at the Y to these young African girls who were being educated to get into the workplace in Nairobi, which they had not had an opportunity to do before. Very few girls were sent to school in those days. And so this gave them a chance to get an education and get a job and not have to just stay home and take care of kids and work in the shambas, the farms. So, and all 14 of them did really well.
Good.
A couple of them went to England and got jobs. The rest stayed in Kenya and had various kinds of jobs.
And even the cultural, just engaging you in conversation and giggling and laughing and giving them unfortunately Americans have sometimes a very negative image around the world. And it isn't until they meet someone with your warmth and your empathy without being condescending, just your regular people, grab the flour and don't drop the egg.
Right.
And I find that that makes such a difference, especially on young people.
Yes, and a couple of the experiences they had were unique because my husband and I took the whole group to the game park in 2 vehicles. There's a big game park right outside Nairobi with all the African animals. They were just roaming free, and we took them, and some of them had never seen a lion before or an elephant.
Even though they lived in country.
They lived in their villages, and they shut things up at night and went to bed.
Well,
and
there's
that's
people
when the
in
animals are out usually.
There's people in Massachusetts who don't know where Paul Revere lived.
That's true. So the other thing we did was we had a farewell tea before we left Kenya, a farewell tea for them at our home in Muthaiga, which was a big deal because Muthaiga was a very white suburb of Nairobi, and to entertain a group of 14 African girls was
high point of their life.
Yeah, well, and it was a risky venture because we didn't know how they'd be treated, but it was all right. Nobody
what
bothered
topped
us.
that? The meeting the Queen Mother.
Oh, that was fun.
So you gave and you got.
Yes. Yes, the Queen Mother came to visit, and we got this very fancy invitation to meet the Queen Mother at a government tea at Government House. So we got all dressed up and went, and she...
You had to have your dress tailored.
I did.
And you hadn't worn high heels in so long you almost fell over.
Right, right. Trying to bow and or curtsy with high heels on was not easy.
How'd you like to curtsy now? I have Rent-A-Crane follow me around to get me
I'd probably
back up.
fall over if I tried, for
But
sure.
what a thrill to it.
Yeah,
She was lovely.
She was lovely.
Yep.
Yeah, she was. Very sweet.
But what a pleasure.
Yes, it was.
Well, you're going to read a passage for us.
I am.
And do you have a favorite part of the book? Is there something that really tugs at your heart or your heartstrings more so than anything else?
I think I like the chapter about driving to the coast with my children and my house
Brave again.
servant. 300 miles through wild, empty bush. It was quite an adventure.
Did you have to have a water bag hanging on the front of the car?
No, but we had plenty of water in the car.
I can remember going across the desert out west once, and we had this funny burlap bag over the front of the car so that in case the car boiled over.
Oh,
I could have boiled over all, but this was in case the car boiled.
No, I never heard of that one, but no, we didn't have
and
to do that.
And I would imagine it would get a little hotter in Africa than it did in a desert in the States.
It was very hot and dusty and dry, yeah.
And the kids adapted any way you took them?
They did. They were really good.
Did any one of them get, and especially the older ones, homesick and really get mad at you because you took them to this godforsaken place?
No, they loved being there.
Wow.
They
I think you'd be hard-pressed to take a teenager today for 2 years
maybe.
away from...
Maybe.
Did you have a television?
Oh, no.
No, I wouldn't think so, let alone. You had electricity.
We
but
had,
you were lucky.
we had a radio and a record player.
You mean you talked to one another?
We actually had dinner together and talked. How about that?
And you played checkers and parcheesi and Monopoly?
Yeah, we did, yes.
Those are all very good bonding experiences, which unfortunately a lot of kids today don't. What did the kids think of the book?
Well, my youngest daughter wasn't particularly interested because she's not in it. She was born after we came back to the States.
We have that in our house, and it's BT, before Tilly.
Before Tilly, before Laurie in our case. My daughter Kelly helped me with the book. She was an English teacher and a better writer than I am, and she helped me with some of the early drafts, and was very pleased. Well, she never saw the final version because she died before it was published. But my other 2 children really enjoyed reading it because it awoke some of their own memories, and so they had fun reading about it.
And none of them are going to follow you and take on the publishing world and write memories of their own?
Not that I know of, but we'll see.
Hey, you said you got a second book?
Yes, I've written it's a young adult novel. It's called A Door Just Opened.
Okay.
And it came out just a year ago, last September.
Well, we didn't get a copy, so if you'd leave that copy with us.
Oh, I'd be glad to.
I would love to read it, and we would love to have you back
another
time to let everybody in our audience know and appreciate the opportunity for books that don't hit, big publishing markets.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you for your own good that we had a young man from Danvers come in and start here, and his career took off. And it's not because of us.
Really?
Because he had wanted to be a writer and went to Marist, and they told him to forget it. So he was a scientist for about 20 years.
Really?
And then he started writing, and he's on his way with children's books.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
Well, this one is a historical novel. It's set in 1910 on a New Jersey farm, and it's quite different from a lot of what's out there in young adult literature. There's no Harry Potter type of magical happenings.
I've done several books here of the Irish in Boston who came out to work the farms in the suburbs.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how they started their life, and how they found a family, and how they grew up and be taken to a farm in Maine and almost be accepted as a son.
Mm-hmm.
And he was still alive today and helped the author do the book.
Really?
On his family's
Wonderful.
adventure. Yeah, so that's my kind of book.
Oh, good.
We're going to pause now so you can get ready to read.
All right. Thank you.
Back in a minute.
I'm going to read the first paragraph of Chapter 1. The Journey Begins. I was 33 years old the first time I flew over Africa. Through darkness so dense, the plane might have been hurtling into a black hole in space. When dawn came and the world finally reappeared, the Nile lay far below, a blue thread looping through the desert of southern Sudan before disappearing into the broader blue of Lake Victoria. Soon the Kenya highlands were sliding beneath us, vast farms that seemed to unroll for miles, and Kikuyu villages whose round whitewashed houses and thatched roofs looked as neat as rows of beehives on the steep green ridges. It was November, and the jacaranda trees were in bloom. Soft clouds of lavender blue floated above the ridges and hollows and over the red-tiled roofs of Nairobi. In a moment, the wheels of the plane would touch down, and my encounter with Africa would begin.
Excellent. Well done.
Thank you.
You didn't say it was a prop airplane. I'm glad we included that.
Yes, it was a pretty noisy trip.
And were the kids afraid, or did they just take it in stride?
They were fine. My oldest daughter, Kathy, who was seated way in the back of the cabin away from us, thought it was a great adventure. I was worried about her, but she wasn't worried about herself.
I'd have been white-knuckled, and my hands would have been imprinted.
I'm that way when I fly anyway, let alone over Africa in the middle of the night.
And have you had to fly in, different places to promote the book, or do you keep it to where you can drive to?
I keep it to where I can drive to, except when I visit my children. My one daughter lives in Oregon, and I've done an appearance
cross
there.
country.
And I've been down to Mattapoisett, Massachusetts, where my son's family lives. So, but otherwise, it's been mostly in this area.
You're a going girl.
I keep trying.
And I think it's wonderful that you were a going girl when it wasn't the thing to do.
Well, that's true.
Life circumstance made you take it on, whether you planned or wanted it or not.
Right. No, that trip to Africa, the original one to Nairobi, really changed me, changed my life. It gave me the confidence to go back to graduate school and to start teaching, to start writing. So it was
Did that
very
change
important.
the family dynamic or enhance it?
I think it enhanced it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was a good example for my children.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And hubby didn't mind? Because unfortunately, hubby's at that time, you stayed home, you did dishes, you put supper on the table, you took care of the kids.
No, he was amazingly supportive.
Cool.
Encouraged me all along the way.
Now, when you had to go to school to learn the protocol and all the parties and everything, he had to go to school to learn the culture.
And the history.
And the history.
The political situation.
So that he didn't put his foot in it at the wrong time.
Right.
and that's very precarious, even to learning it, I think, until you experience it one-on-one. And like the women who challenged you when you said you didn't want a house staff. If you had not processed that before you answered, you could have offended them and they could have, just walked away, and one
Right.
heck of a way to start off. But
Yeah. It was pretty important to be careful of what you said and how you said it.
and the kids stepped right in, no problem.
Yes, and my little one, Kelly, when she was only 2 when we went, she was absolutely fluent in Swahili by the time we left. She was chattering away in Swahili. She was just learning to talk, so she learned English and Swahili at the same
Well,
time.
that's what I've heard that so many times. I was
Yeah.
a counselor at the YMCA, and we had an awful lot of Oriental children would come for the summer, and they didn't speak a word of English. And it was immersion. And that's how their families, and usually educated people who were taking college courses, would find the best way to teach it. When one little boy, I know 10 words in Japanese, and he was assigned to me, and God help him, we got through the summer on 10 words. And about 5 years later, I was walking through a doorway, and here came a teenage Oriental young man with a great big smile, and he started speaking. I couldn't hear anything. He's going like this to his mother. I used to wear my hair in a pug on top of my head.
Oh.
And he had recognized me as we passed in the doorway.
Oh, my goodness.
And we laughed and laughed and laughed. But that's nice. How often do you see, like, I get to the girls that you spend so much time with to know that they made it, that they took the energy that you gave them and the ability that you found yourself and then gifted to them, that they went on and they didn't lose what
was
they
very,
had learned.
very satisfying. And about the language issue, African friends of ours we visited them sometimes, and their children would chatter in English to us, in Kikuyu, their tribal language, to their grandparents, and in Swahili to the servants.
Isn't that
They're
unbelievable?
switching,
Yeah, that they
instinctively knew which language to use with which people. It was very interesting.
But that's because they learned it young.
Exactly. They grew up learning 3 languages.
I can remember I was a Lauback teacher, and they taught me Russian.
Ooh.
So that I would know what I was expecting of someone who didn't know English.
Oh.
Because Russian was as hard for me as English was for them.
Yeah, and English is such a hard language to learn.
Russian's harder.
And Russian's harder? Oh, dear.
And I can remember words that looked like battleships with 3 masts on them.
Oh, my gosh.
Absolutely confusing. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed the book. I think you did
Thank
an excellent, and I can't believe you didn't do it from notes. But I did the letters.
The letters helped a lot. I mean, there are a lot of things you don't write to your parents, but a lot of the things that were in the letters did spark other memories of mine. So.
That's when I was walking around with a broken leg, but I didn't tell them because they would worry.
Right.
And I look forward to reading the next book.
Thank you.
And I really would love to have you come back.
I'd love to.
And thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much, Monica.
Nice to have had you.
Nice to be here.
That's it for Off the Shelf today. The book means goodbye. You're on your own for pronunciation. Dorothy Stephens has been my guest. I am your host, Veronica Rangers. Bye.